Hello, and welcome to this week's Devotional. Today I'd like to talk about Bach's magnificent oratorio St. John Passion. As a member of De Gratiam Ensemble, we have had several opportunities to perform this, and this work has always held a very personal place in my heart. As a performer and as a Christian, the words of the text, which is taken primarily from John's Gospel, this takes us on a very personal, emotional journey through Christ's death on the cross. And as a continual player, being in the very midst of this ensemble, right from the very beginning throughout this story, there is always a very heartfelt sense of being in the story itself. And that always moves me. As a continual player, as a harpsichordist, there's many challenges that this piece brings to me personally in the John's Gospel. Bach wrote this in 1725, prior to writing Matthew Passion. It feels as though Bach shows his own personal faith just intimately through the music. And through this experience, I think, as a performer as well as an audience member, that we are taken more deeply into the narrative, into the emotional journey that Jesus takes. And one of the movements that have always struck me, particularly as a performer, is bass aria Mein Teurer Heiland. I believe this is one of my favourite arias, although also at the same time a rather scary aria, as it exposes everything in us, in me as a harpsichordist. At this point in the story, Jesus had just been beaten and mocked, and with the crowd shouting, "Crucify, crucify, crucify him," he was just taken to the cross, and he has just suffered the most painful of the deaths. We are left with this sense of, where does this lead? And then here at this point comes this glorious bass aria, Mein Teurer Heiland. Bach writes this in a very bright key of A major in a 12/8 time signature, and it has a very joyful atmosphere. But as we look into the words of this text, we are drawn into this sense that this is a journey, this is a beginning of the journey as a Christian. The bass soloist makes a very personal, heartfelt prayer, asking God, what does this mean? What have you just accomplished by dying on the cross? Does this really mean salvation for us? Have you really won victory once and for all? And does this really mean that the gospel has now been opened worldwide? Throughout the Bible story, we always sense this feeling of longing. There is always a longing to be where we should be, where we want to be, but we are not able to do so. And there is an age-old problem that happens throughout generations of sin. Namely, that we want to live our lives for our own renown, for our own self. Through the chorale that the chorus sings, together with the string accompaniment, this makes it even more of this personal commitment that the bass soloist makes, and perhaps invites all of us to make, perhaps inviting all of us to investigate and to think, why has Jesus died on the cross for us? What does this really mean? And why do we say it is a victory? I think one of the answers is already found in the recitative that follows directly from this aria. And in this recitative, we witness very distinctly, very audibly, the scene where the curtain that has previously separated God and mankind has now been torn in two. And we have this glorious scene where there's an earthquake and the curtain just being miraculously torn in two. We see a visual representation of what this gospel message, Christ's death, signifies, in that we were once alienated from God, but through Christ's death on the cross, that God has now opened up a way for us to come to him, that God has now opened up a way so that we can be reconciled to him. What this curtain being torn and what this aria represents is the fact that that has all been achieved, that Christ's death really means that this is the final, ultimate fulfillment of Scripture's promise. Christ's death on the cross is the beginning of the journey for us. In Paul's letter to the Colossians, we read, "For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." And as we turn to him, we now into a new journey of living in the light, and we have hope. This hope is an assured hope. Apostle Peter writes in 1 Peter 1, "In his great mercy he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil or fade, kept in heaven for us." So we understand that this is an inheritance. It's already been achieved and it is already kept in heaven for us. That we don't need to fear, but that we have something so glorious to look forward to. And in this prayer of the bass soloist in my teurer Heiland, we see firsthand what this really means. This is a message, this is a glorious truth that we take a step forward in faith, turning to Christ, thanking Christ for what he has done for us.
And bowing his head, he gave up the ghost. My Lord and Master, let me ask thee, Lord and Master, let me ask thee, Lord and Master, let me ask thee. At this thy glorious crucifixion, was all fulfilled with thy last breath, By dying hast thou conquered death, by dying hast thou conquered death, by dying conquered death. By dying hast thou conquered death, by dying conquered death. Oh, thine own pain and desolation shall we attain salvation. And has the world been saved today? Has the world been saved today? Has the world been saved? Has the world been saved today? Oh, thy suffering soul, it must be thy suffering soul, it must be thy suffering soul, it must be and bow for us, thy head, and bow for In silence, yea, yet bow thy head fast, and say, is